If you are watching this video first, go back to video 1. This series builds on itself. Each video is a layer, and the one beneath it makes this one hit harder. Start from the beginning. The Calm Code, full series above.
In the last video, we talked about the signs, the quiet ways this force is already trying to work in your life. But here's the question nobody wants to ask. If this energy is real, if it's moving toward you, if the signs are there, why do so many people still feel stuck? Why do the same patterns keep repeating? Why does it feel like something is blocking it? There is something blocking it. And it's been inside you the whole time. The invisible saboteur. There is a part of you that you present to the world every day. The part that shows up at work, navigates conversations, manages impressions, avoids embarrassment. The part that knows exactly how it wants to be seen. This part has a powerful belief at its core, a belief it never questions. The belief is, I am separate. Separate from other people, separate from the universe, separate from this force we've been talking about. Operating alone in a world that is fundamentally threatening, where resources are limited, where love must be earned, where every situation is a potential loss. This belief shapes everything. The way you approach money, the way you approach your work, the way you approach every relationship you have ever been in. And here's the devastating part. It is not real. It is a constructed identity. A protective layer built so early in life that you stopped being able to see where it ends and where you begin. Some traditions call it the ego, some call it the false self. We could simply call it the part of you that forgot who you really are. What the ego actually does. Let's get specific because this isn't abstract. Here are the patterns the ego creates in everyday life. The ego needs to be right, not just correct, but right in a way that makes others wrong. Have you ever continued an argument not because you cared about the outcome, but because losing the argument felt unbearable? That is the ego protecting its identity. The ego compares constantly. It is always measuring your success against someone else's, your body against an image, your life against what it should be. It cannot simply experience, it must evaluate. The ego carries grudges, not because holding on serves you, but because letting go would require admitting vulnerability. And vulnerability feels like danger to this part of you. The ego seeks approval. It shapes your words, your choices, your image around the question, how will this make me look? It is so dependent on the opinions of others that it will sacrifice its own truth to avoid disapproval. And most dangerously, the ego lives in fear. Fear disguised as anger, fear disguised as arrogance, fear disguised as withdrawal, fear disguised as control. Every destructive pattern in your finances, in your career, in your creative life, traces back here. What the ego does to relationships. Now let's look at what this does in relationships, because this is where it becomes most visible and most painful. The ego enters a relationship with a transaction in mind. It is calculating, consciously or not, what it stands to gain. What will this person give me? Will they make me feel secure? Will they validate me? Will they fill the space that I don't know how to fill myself? And when the other person inevitably fails to deliver on these unconscious expectations, because no human being can fulfill another person's unresolved inner needs, the ego responds with disappointment, resentment, or control. You've seen this, you may have lived it. The relationship that started with electricity and ended with distance. The friendship that felt suffocating once you stopped needing each other. The dynamic where one person constantly gives and the other constantly takes, until the giver disappears. These are not failures of love, they are failures of self-knowledge. Because here's what the ego refuses to understand. You cannot give from emptiness. You cannot love freely when you are operating from fear. You cannot connect genuinely when the deeper motive is to be completed. Real connection, the kind that sustains, that grows, that weathers difficulty, cannot be built on need. It can only be built on wholeness. The blame game and why it keeps you stuck. There is one ego behavior that blocks this force more completely than almost anything else. Blame. When something goes wrong, and something always does, the ego's first move is to locate the cause outside of itself. It was them. It was circumstances. It was bad timing. It was unfair. And yes, sometimes those things are true. People do behave badly. Situations are unfair. Loss is real. But the moment you give all your energy to what happened to you, you surrender the one thing that can actually change your life. your response. The person who spends 5 years angry at an ex-partner who hurt them is not punishing the other person. They are punishing themselves, while the other person has long moved on. The person who blames their upbringing, their culture, their circumstances for every limitation in their life is not wrong about the obstacles, but they have handed over their power to those obstacles. Blame is the ego's way of avoiding the most important question of all: what part did I play, and what is mine to change? This is not about shame. Shame is also an ego trap, just pointed inward instead of outward. This is about responsibility. Clean, honest, liberating responsibility. The fear beneath everything. Let's go one layer deeper. At the root of every ego behavior, the need to be right, the comparison, the blame, the control, there is one emotion: fear. Fear that you are not enough. Fear that if you open yourself fully, you will be rejected. Fear that the world is not safe. Fear that love is conditional and fragile. And here's what's extraordinary. This fear lives in the same space where your connection to this larger force is meant to flow. Think of it like a pipe. The intelligence of the universe, the energy that organizes, guides, provides, connects, is constantly moving toward you. But if fear is filling the pipe, nothing gets through. You can meditate, affirm, visualize, and read every self-help book ever written. But if the underlying current of fear remains unexamined, the flow is blocked. The antidote to fear is not courage. The antidote to fear is love. Not romantic love, something far more fundamental. A genuine orientation toward life that says, I am not separate, I am not alone. There is something working with me, not against me. I can open rather than close. When you make that shift, even partially, even imperfectly, something changes. The pipe clears, the energy moves. The signs we talked about in the last video become unmistakable. One practice for this week. Here is something small but powerful. This week, every time you notice yourself in a reactive state, irritated, defensive, resentful, withdrawn, pause, just one breath, and ask one question silently to yourself. What am I afraid of right now? Not what is wrong with them, not why is this happening, just what am I afraid of? You don't have to answer the question out loud. You don't have to solve it. Just naming the fear begins to dismantle its power over you. Because the moment you see the ego at work, you are no longer fully inside it. And that small gap, that moment of witnessing, is where something new can begin. Now here's what I want you to consider before the next video. If the ego is the obstacle, and we've now seen clearly how it works, then what does life look like on the other side of it? What happens when you stop operating from fear and separation, and start operating from something that actually works? In the next video, we build that life, from the ground up, and we start with something you can do tomorrow morning.